We have a pretty significant signing in the NHL. The Habs have locked up Tyler Toffoli. We'll discuss the contract and what other moves could be a result of this for the Canadiens. We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a pretty significant signing here today. The Montreal Canadiens have locked up unrestricted free agent forward Tyler Toffoli on a 4-year contract. Now, the contract's pretty reasonable, $4.25 million per year, and he did not receive any form of a no trade or no move clause. So this, to me, is an awesome signing by Marc Bergevin and the Montreal Canadiens. We already knew that they were in the mix for another top 6 forward. I talked about this last night in our latest trade and free agent rumor video, that the Habs were looking at top 6 forwards, and they were kind of trying to zone in here on a Toffoli signing, and that's exactly what we see here today. Although I didn't know the terms that they were obviously discussing, I did not think they'd get him this cheap. I thought it would command a little bit more money, but obviously with the market being the way it is, a lot of free agents aren't getting quite the payday that they originally thought they would. As heading into this season, obviously lots have changed since the springtime. So obviously, like I said, this is a great signing for Montreal. Another loss for the Vancouver Canucks. They've lost Markstrom, they lost Tanev, now they lose Toffoli. Just having a mass exodus here of all their top free agents that Jim Benning made his top priorities to re-sign and bring back. He's been unable to do that with any of them. Now, I know to a degree there are obviously concerns over their cap for the next little while, because they have guys like Pettersson and Hughes coming out of ELCs that are going to need big raises. I know there's a concern about how much cash is being paid out this year compared to future years as well, like not actual cap hit, but actual cash. That's a concern for many teams as well. And at the same time, they have a very expensive bottom 6 that has tied up a lot of their cap space. They have a cap hit for the Luongo retirement, and they really were focusing hard on Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and it kind of tied a lot of things up, and it really took away their focus here, and other teams have been swooping in and taking their players. I mean, this really should have been a contract that Vancouver should have been able to do. I think if Canuck fans would have been told, before this, that going into free agency, they'd be able to lock up Toffoli for 4 years at $4.25 million with no form of any trade clauses in the contract, they would have been quite pleased with that. But the Canucks' loss is the Habs' gain. Marc Bergevin gets the job done. Of course, we've already seen him make several other additions this offseason, so I think Bergevin and the Habs are having a great offseason. Addressed the backed-up goaltender already with Jake Allen. Added Joel Edmondson on the defense, which makes them bigger and harder to play against. It certainly adds some much-needed size. He trades Max Domi for Josh Anderson. Now, I do have some minor concerns over the Josh Anderson contract, but I really like Josh Anderson as a player for Montreal, and I do think he fits in quite nicely there. So hopefully the contract works out well, and if he can play like we think he can, then theoretically it should be fine, but there is some risk associated with a long-term deal on a player who's dealt with a lot of injuries that way. But either way, this is a great offseason for Bergevin and the Habs. As a spin-off of this, though, we will see the Habs make additional moves as a bit of a necessity, which we already kind of knew and talked about that were in the works here. With this signing, the Habs are technically over the cap a little bit, so they need to move some money out, but there's no huge rush. They can go over by as much as 10% during the offseason, but there is a number of players that I've already talked about before that I do expect that could be moved. It's just a matter of who and what. Now, we're looking at the back end with the addition on the blue line that they've made. They have more than enough capable defensemen. So they added Edmondson. They get Romanov coming in. So I would look for another probably left shot guy to go. Probably a Victor Mete is a prime example of somebody who could be moved. Possibly Brett Kulak. But I think Mete is, his name's been out there. And even though he got a contract the other day, that doesn't really mean much. It's a pretty cheap contract for somebody else to acquire. And in the forward group, I would say Paul Byron is the name that I've been hearing out there as well. I can't help but wonder what this means for the future of Tomas Tatar. Not to say that Tatar would be traded. I think it's possible that he sticks around and finishes up the contract, but he's got 1 year left, and just for future, I wonder how this will impact his long-term stay with Montreal. Now, of course, there's been no mention as well about the Habs bringing back Ilya Kovalchuk, which was heavily rumored before, so we'll see if he can, if he gets a contract with them or anybody, because he hasn't signed anywhere as of yet, so we'll see at this point. I wouldn't be too worried about it if I'm Montreal, because they've made several other moves to kind of work around that, and they're in a pretty good spot now with their forward group. But I fully suspect, I don't know if it'll be today. It may not be right away. It might be until tomorrow or later in the week. Hard to say. But the Montreal Canadiens will definitely be trading out one or two players to create some additional cap space here for sure. So let me know your thoughts on the Toffoli signing, and we'll discuss further down in the comments. Also, let me know your thoughts on what trades Montreal should make now to create some space to kind of offset this new signing. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.